everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight for our fourth session of the Bison Transport Leadership Series, The Black Female Coach Experience. My name is LeadHERship, and I'm thrilled to be here this evening. This is a very important conversation. The Bison Transport Leadership Series wants to inspire women to be community leaders and leaders in life. We bring together inspirational leaders from all areas of sport to tell their personal and professional stories, offer valuable advice and guidance, and share practical tips that participants can use on and off the field of play. Sport Manitoba, in partnership with Bison Transport, aspire to increase female engagement in sport by providing an informative, inclusive, and inspirational experience throughout this series. Here's a look into our title sponsor tonight, Bison Transport.
It started when I was a child. I was always amazed by the trucks. And you know, you did the little arm thing and they'd honk at you, and I was just amazed thinking, I want to do that. I love the freedom of the highway. And it's not just a man's job anymore. Anyone can do it.
I was in a classroom with 12 men. I was the only woman in that classroom. I was actually told by a couple of instructors that a woman belongs in a truck, but not behind the driver's wheel. I got out of the truck, went to another school, and I actually found a school where they didn't care whether you're a man or a woman. And I got my license. I didn't give up.
Girls can do anything they put their mind to. I would say just do something you love. If driving is what you love, it is a very rewarding career. You really can't change people's minds. They have to change it on their own. You can say, look, I've been doing it for so long. I enjoy it. There's so many women out there. But if they don't have an open mind, you're not going to change theirs.
Women can do whatever they want and put their mindset just like anybody else, you know. Like driving a semi is intimidating, but it doesn't mean you can't do it. So just gotta put your mind to it, that's all, and be confident.
If society is telling girls to be something different, I would say go against society. Do what you want to do what makes you happy.
Being a woman, you could do anything. There's no boundaries, not anymore. There was back way in the day, before my time. But no, you could do anything.
The only person that's going to stop you from doing it is yourself. So it doesn't matter what society says. If you want to do it, then you do it.
Bison Transport, we love you, we thank you. So a few housekeeping notes before we get started. If your internet quality is poor, you can click here to switch stream to view at a lower bandwidth. Your video quality will decrease, but your audio quality, it will remain the same. If you're having any technical issues, you can click on the request help bubble on the bottom right corner of the webcast page, and your help request will be emailed back to the email address that you provided. And lastly, throughout tonight's session, we so encourage you to ask questions using the question box on the right-hand side of the webcast, and to engage on social media, whether that be Instagram, Twitter, or the old Facebook, tagging Sport Manitoba and using that all-important hashtag, LeadHERship, capital HER there. Tonight, we are going to hear from a panel of coaches from across our country about their experiences and the unique development engagement of Black female coaches. We are thrilled to get started. So let's get started. Let's meet tonight's guests.
Hi, my name is Erin. I'm with Bison Transport. I'm the Supervisor of Driver Recruitment. Tonight's panel features elite coaches from across Canada. Leanna Osei is the founder of the Black Canadian Coaches Association, CanLead Sports, and currently works at St. Francis Xavier University in Nova Scotia, where she is the head coach of women's basketball and an instructor in the Department of Human Kinetics. Coach Lee grew up in Toronto and played collegiate basketball at the NCAA and U sports levels. She is an advocate for gender and racial equality, and she believes in leadership through sport. Jolie Christian is the longest serving Black female head coach in youth sports and is currently the head coach of women's volleyball at the Royal Military College of Canada. Prior to joining RMC, Jolie led Queen's University's women's program to their first and only Ontario University Athletics Championship and Youth Sports National Championship appearance to date. Jolie was named the 2006 Ontario Female Coach of the Year and is the only coach in Ontario to lead the provincial team program to a Canada Games gold medal. Jolie grew up in Scarborough and competed for the University of Regina before finishing her career at the University of Manitoba. Internationally, Jolie has represented Canada as a member of the national team program and as the head coach of the current military national team. Jolie is an advocate for equality in sport and believes sport can change lives. Tasha McKenna is the technical director and performance coach for Basketball Nova Scotia, the sport and recreation inclusion lead for YWCA Halifax, and an assistant coach with the St. Mary's women's basketball team. She is also a mentor for Sport Nova Scotia's Black and Indigenous Coach Mentorship Program and the Black Female Coach Mentorship Program established in partnership between the Black Canadian Coaches Association and the Coaching Association of Canada. Tasha grew up in Timberlea, Nova Scotia, and pursued her post-secondary education and basketball career at Lakehead University in Thunder Bay. Having always been an advocate for racial and gender equity, it took her quite some time to find her voice, and she hopes that she can use her journey as a tool to help others find theirs. Welcome, coaches.
Welcome, coaches is right. So without further ado, let's bring it in. Coach Lee, Coach Jolie, and Coach Tasia. Ladies, thank you so much for being here with us tonight for Sport Manitoba Leadership Series, sponsored by Bison Transport, the Black Coaching Experience. So, ladies, let's get rolling here. I always love to know, I mean, there's a reason that you're doing all that you're doing, but how did it begin? So, Coach Lee, I'm going to start with you. How did you get involved in sport?
Thanks a lot, Lee. I appreciate it. And shout out Bison Transport. That was an awesome intro. I actually found myself bopping my head to the beat. So how did I get involved in sport? Well, my mom was an immigrant and she moved to Canada from West Africa and specifically Ghana. And my mom had like a 4th grade education and just unshakable faith about her. And she came here to give her kids a better opportunity. And we were living in what we refer to as kind of Toronto community city housing. And really, when I was young, I kind of had 2 choices to make. Was I going to be playing sports, or was I going to be doing something that was not as conducive to being a good kid? And so I picked up basketball when I was really young. I did a little bit of soccer, but mostly basketball. And that's really how I got started. It kept me out of trouble. I guess one interesting thing to note is when I started playing basketball, my mother wasn't a fan. She actually didn't support me in playing basketball and didn't see me play until I was a senior in university. But that was more because she was very driven about, this is the reason why we made these sacrifices. Everything's got to be about school. Everything's got to be about faith. Girls should be trying to become nurses and doctors. And so she just didn't see sport in that. And so I think part of my upbringing was definitely molded by trying to push against that envelope of seeing myself represented in sport and playing sport.
Amazing. Julie, how about yourself? How did you get started in sport?
My story's not that far off from Leanna's in that my mom was an immigrant from Antigua and raised us single mom. There were 4 of us in the house, my sister and then my 2 cousins who my mom had raised. And, it was one of those things where I had this amazing coach who thought, oh, you're athletic. Let's try playing sport. And volleyball just spoke to me. I played a little basketball. I ran some track. I ran hurdles, but volleyball spoke to me. It had a language all its own that just made me excited to be on the court, excited to be in the gym every day. And, with my mom was such a great role model to me, being a single mom, raising us every single day, and the opportunity that sport gave me to go to school. I wanted to go to university. I wanted to be something, make my mother proud. And And I knew that sport was my avenue to do that. I'd heard you could go to the States, you could stay in Canada, you could go wherever you wanted, and then you could go pro. And there were all these opportunities available when I thought about what sport could give me. It's weird. I never thought that I'd be a doctor or a lawyer or any of those other avenues. It was just really, I thought sport could get me somewhere. And so yeah, that's how I got started. It was just, I was the worst kid on the team, the worst player on the team in elementary school, and set my sights on being the best. And my mom, she passed away a few years ago, but she was my biggest supporter. She wanted me to be the best I could be. No participation awards. She was, you go after it and you be the best at whatever it is you're going to do.
Well, I'm sure she was proud, because from being one of the worst kids in junior high all the way to being on the senior national team, not too shabby there in the old sport of volleyball. So Tasia, how about yourself? How did you get involved in sport?
Yeah, my whole family played every sport under the sun. So always proud to say I was a multi-sport athlete growing up. And I was certainly someone that was outside all the time, whether it was on a scooter or a bike or, playing in the woods. It was always active. So, I wanted to play everything. I have an older brother and he also played every sport. And I certainly was the little sister that wanted to follow him and, would jump off the stage and try to insert myself into different games that he and his buddies were playing in. But, I've always been a basketball person. My mom always talks about when I was born, I think I was about 2 or 3, and she would go back to her women's league pickup games and she'd put me on the sidelines and I would get up and walk onto the court. So she used to walk around on the court with me kind of hanging off of her hip. So, basketball's kind of been in my blood ever since I can remember. And so, I said to my mom and dad when I was growing up that I want a job where I can, all I have to do is think about basketball and I can wear sweatpants all the time. And so, I'm gracious enough and privileged enough to have my parents still with me, and they're actually downstairs probably listening to what I have to say right now. And a couple of weeks ago, Mom said, you're doing what you said you want to do. Like, you're in sweatpants right now and you're working in the job that you said you wanted to work in. So it's a big credit to my family for getting me involved in sport and also encouraging me to play whatever sport I wanted. And then naturally basketball was just the better fit for me.
There you go. And Tasia, unfortunately, because of this pandemic, I think all of us have careers in jogging pants and sweatpants right now due to the fact that we're all working from home. I'm not even going to stand up and show everybody what I'm wearing on the bottom here. But either that, I have to wonder, though, you're all female athletes, all Black female athletes. And Coach Lee, you spoke to the fact that it was kind of one way or another for you when it came to that path in life. And I'm just wondering, as a Black athlete, what are perhaps some of the barriers that you faced and that have helped you as a coach now?
Certainly. The biggest barrier, I think, for me was just financial support. And so I guess it was kind of twofold. I felt it at home because we didn't really have much to begin with. Actually, one of the biggest things I hated doing when I was younger was helping my mom do hair. And it actually was how we brought in the most money. So my mom would start doing braids and then I would continue and finish off. And then I'd be like, okay, can I go outside to play now? And she'd kind of be like, okay, fine, go ahead. When it came down to playing formalized sports, so outside of, like my local school, there just was so little support. And I'm really grateful that I had coaches that opened up doors for me when I was really young and quite literally took me in and bought me my first pair of sneakers, paid for my registration fees, even meals after games. I don't think there's any way I can repay my coaches that really got me started into the game, because I just don't know where I would be. So I would say that was initially my biggest barrier. And at home, it was always an issue of contention, but I really wouldn't have been able to literally lace them up if it wasn't for my sport coaches.
And Tasia, have you faced any barriers within your career? Specifically, I know that you played multi-sports, but because being a Black athlete.
Yeah, and I think that growing up, I might not have been as aware of them as I am now when I kind of reflect back on my childhood. So my dad is white and my mom is black, and when I look at both of them, I see myself in them, regardless of the color of their skin. Like my mom's quite a bit darker than me, and obviously my dad is quite lighter than me, so I fall somewhere in the middle. And so wherever I went, I always pictured myself as someone that fit in with whoever it was. I never really noticed the difference in the shade of my skin. So my mom did both my parents did a great job and would drive my brother and I into the city. So we live about 20 to 30 minutes outside of the city, and we played our first time playing basketball was at the Community Y, which was in downtown Halifax, which has the YMCA Panthers, and that's where we grew up playing basketball. It is a predominantly Black community and predominantly Black club, and so that was a really great space for me to kind of recognize that the people that I went to school with did not look like the people that I was playing basketball with. And that's when I would kind of reflect a little bit and look at my mom and then look at my dad and be like, where do I fit in this space? So I think I wouldn't necessarily say, as Leanna mentioned, I didn't have the financial barrier. So I'm always appreciative of the fact that my family was in a position that they were able to provide for my brother and I in a quite comfortable manner. Mind you, I'm sure parents don't tell you all the details that are going on, but I think that there were barriers there that my parents did a really great job at not allowing me to see. They just kind of figured out a way to navigate through that. And I think back to, different names that would be said, or, how our team might have been looked at when we were younger, when we'd walk into a gym. And at the time I didn't realize it. And now, like I said, reflecting back on it, it's like, yeah, that certainly was a barrier. And I think all of the parents and the coaches did everything that they could to just, look at us and say, it's okay. Like, keep playing. And so I think, I ended up playing it with basketball teams filled with predominantly white teammates, and even different conversations that I wasn't really sure how to have. Like I still reflect back on like conversations about like shaving your legs, and I was like, I can't really see the hair on my legs. Like I don't understand what the issue is here, what's going on, and so it's those little conversations that I'd have to go back and chat with my mom about. How do I have that conversation when I look different than them? But yeah, again, I'm so privileged to say that I didn't meet as many barriers as some, and I still feel like there's an element of what I'm doing in my career that I need to knock down barriers for those that do have them.
And Jolie, I'm thinking about yourself. You transitioned from being an athlete in volleyball to a coach in 2003, as we heard in your introduction, the longest serving coach in youth sports, the longest serving Black coach in youth sports. But you are coaching a sport and played a sport that, statistically speaking, is predominantly white. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering what your experience has been.
It's interesting because I was very fortunate when I started in this sport, because when I started, there weren't a lot either. And, but I was surrounded by girls that looked like me. So the Scarborough Titans was the club I started out with, and they did such a fantastic job of recruiting. They recruited all the girls in the Scarborough community. And so I saw girls that looked like me. So I want to say I was almost a Pollyanna unicorn situation where I didn't know I was an other. I really felt like I was one of, because that is what I saw in practice. That is what I saw day to day. And it wasn't until, as I start to get higher up in the game, as I got older and I'd go to tournaments and I'd go, wait a second, we do look different. And we are the only club that has 8 or 9 others that look like me. And, we didn't have matching tracksuits. All the white clubs had matching tracksuits, and they all had their hair done just so. And, we had workman's socks and headbands and our sweatpants, and we mismatched, and, we borrowed uniforms. We didn't keep our uniforms. Our coaches took those things away from us and washed them for us. And, I look back at really the humble beginnings of where I started, and didn't realize then that my experience was not, I wouldn't say racist, but my experience was an other. It was a really other experience because everyone around me looked like me. And now as I as I coach and I look at, and I, and I go out and I recruit and I don't see a lot of girls that continue to look like me, it saddens me. It really upsets me that it hasn't changed. And in fact, has gotten worse, I would say. I'd say there's less young Black girls playing volleyball now than there were when I played. And it, it does it saddens me. It frustrates me. And it's something that I hope will change, but I'm not sure it can change. And I think there's a lot of reasons, socioeconomic reasons for that. And, a lot of other things that we need to explore as to why it hasn't advanced and moved beyond where it was, 30, 40 years ago. Like, the reality is I'm an old dog in a, in the world in terms of coaching and sport. And so, it's sad to me that it hasn't moved.
And Julie, I think you just hit something on the head there, and it's on so many different levels when it comes to women in sport, not only with athletes but coaches, is that the representation and seeing someone who looks like you doing the job, and how much that matters, or playing the sport, because then if you see it, you can believe you can be it. And Coach Lee, that's why I'd like to pivot now. You are the founder of the Black Canadian Coaches Association. Why was it created, and what are you looking to accomplish from it?
Sure. The BCCA actually has its early inspirations from the original Black Coaches Association that was started in the U.S. Some odd years ago, 20 odd years ago, maybe even longer than that. And so I wanted to take a moment and shout out the late, great John Chaney and John Thompson. We of course lost John Chaney last week. I think a big part of starting the BCCA came from a lot of coach discourses around how we can better support our athletes. And at sort of that intersection of COVID is here, what is it exactly? And much of what we saw in media with the racial injustices that were happening, not just in the US, but here in Canada against Black and Indigenous groups, many coaches felt compelled to take action. On a personal level, as a young coach, I experienced different forms of gender and racial discrimination, and especially related to when I took this jump to coach at the youth sport level. And so a few years ago, I went through a terrible ordeal, and I said to myself, I hope no other coach ever has to go through this. And unfortunately, from that point onwards, in conversing with different coaches in different spaces, I had discovered that my experience actually wasn't exceptional, wasn't unique, and that there are a lot of gaps as it related to supporting Black and Indigenous people of color who are athletes and coaches and administrators. And so I certainly didn't intend on having the BCCA launch in June 2020. I think it was huge in terms of the timing. I think a lot of my mentors and a lot of my peers were like, what better way to lead than to intentionally create a platform that is meant really for three things: to celebrate, to advocate through allyship, and to network. And it's been an incredible experience so far, but that's kind of the beginnings of the BCCA. It came from coaches and sport leaders really trying to better serve our athletes and the young people that we work with, but also each other, and to provide each other with resources and support.
And so much of that is about mentorship. And so I'm just wondering too, because the Black Female Coach Mentorship Program with the Coaching Association of Canada, did the BCC not help to launch that program as well?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, I want to shout out the Coaching Association of Canada, and with Lorraine's leadership, and Isabel as well. In a lot of the preliminary research that went into creating the BCC, I started to look at what are the precedents that exist already? Like, what's available in our youth sports space, what's available through Sport Canada, our provincial government, our federal government, and the Coaching Association of Canada is like the gold standard as it pertains to coaching. And so I actually found myself browsing on their website, and as a coach that I actually wasn't registered. I was registered with the CAC, but years ago I wasn't, and I just found a challenge in not seeing us represented. And so we went with a pitch as to how to better serve BIPOC members of our coaching community. And I said, Sport Canada has really taken such a huge initiative and has seen some success in gender and sport initiatives. And I said, can we put forth something that is specific for Black females? And I said, look, as a young woman of color, I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for the one only other Black female that I knew opening that door for me into the high performance coaching realm. And so if we can just be more intentional about carving out those spaces, imagine, where we can be. And what's been really exciting is with this pilot project that CAC has allowed us to actually spearhead from, beginning to end. It's been so empowering because we've been able to connect and support and empower one another. And our reception, even from the calls for mentees, we're still having mentees. We launched this program in October, and this week we still have women across the country that are inquiring about how to be mentors and mentees for this program. So that speaks to the necessity of it.
And there's some mentors obviously on our panel. Tasia, I know that you do a lot of mentorship. Why do you do it? Why is there a need for it?
A lot of mentorship, but I think it's also important to just make mention that although I have that title of mentor, I learn a lot from the mentees, and I learn a lot from the other mentors as well, right? That was one of the big reasons that I wanted to get involved. Is it's an opportunity to not only grow a network, but as Coach Lee said, sometimes it takes that one person that looks like you to say, hey, here's a place that you can go, or I'm going to open the door a little bit, and it's your job to push it the rest of the way through. And so through both mentorship programs, so through the Black Female Coach Mentorship Program that Coach Lee was just talking about, and through the Black and Indigenous Coach Mentorship Program that's been launched by Sport Nova Scotia, I've had the absolute, it's been an honor really to take part in both of those. And it was really a space that I'd never been a part of. I think through the CAC, there was the Aboriginal Apprentice Program for Canada Games, the Female Coach Apprentice Program for Canada Games, and then there's a lot of female coach apprentice programs kind of across the country. But oftentimes, if you actually look at some of the recipients, there aren't actually a lot that look like us. It's usually one or two. So it's really nice to see something that's very targeted. And then the hope is that they can have those opportunities where they're in an apprentice position with a youth sport team or a CCA level team as well. So my hope is that, even if it's one mentee that I can open a door just a little bit for, or if I can give just one piece of information or connect them with one person that can help them along their way, I'll be thrilled. And it's always worth noting that, mentors are not the ones that create the path. It's really the mentees that do it themselves. And we're just there to offer a little bit of guidance. But the work that I think we'll see from the mentees in both spaces, what they'll do in the future is all because they're willing to raise their hand and step in and do the work and learn. So always a big kudos and a credit to the mentees that are joining these two pilot mentorship programs and eager to learn.
And Tasia, when you mentioned that, it's not just about them learning from you, but also you learning from the mentee, is there a lesson or is there anything that you're seeing in these young athletes that you go, wow, I can't even believe they're thinking in this way because it wasn't even part of my brain waves when I was their age?
Yeah, actually I have one mentee who was probably, if you were to look back when I was growing up, would have been a mentor of mine, Leslie States, who runs the Maritime Elite Girls Academy out here in Halifax. And she's older than I am, and I'm her mentor, and I keep laughing and I'm like, that I'm going to learn a lot from you. And one of the big takeaways from working with her was, and with Coach Lee over here as well, we started the Maritime Women's Basketball Association with the help of Brad Janes through Basketball New Brunswick, and it was the first, right now, the first amateur association for women to play basketball in at a youth sport level. So we've had some really great conversations there. So Leslie's a co-commissioner or vice commissioner with me, and she's just been fantastic. So I've learned so much from her. And then Rachel Ivey, who is my mentee with the Black Female Coaches Association. If you take a look at what she's doing with the Northern Trailblazers, it's one of the biggest basketball programs in northern Alberta, and she and her coworker pretty much do everything in-house. So she coaches almost about 6 hours a day or more, and she talks about, you know, printing shirts and doing up their medals, and she does it all. And I've never done that. So I'm sitting here looking at like, well, how do you do all of that? Like, teach me how you can, you know, keep costs down and navigate those spaces. So, you know, when I look at not only the mentees that I've had the privilege to work with, but also the mentees that are in all these programs, like their resumes were unbelievable. Even the ones that weren't necessarily selected, that are still showing up to open calls for mentees, and all of a sudden anyone that wasn't selected is still there. And to me, that just speaks volumes that, you know, it's not just the ones that we select that are going to move forward and do great things. There are so many that we could have picked from, and they're eager to learn.
Oh, that's fantastic. And you know, Jolie, I'm sitting here and I think about how long that you've been a coach in youth sports. And our first session that we did in this leadership series with Sport Manitoba, and sponsored by our wonderful title sponsor, Bison Transport. You know, it was about how there is a lack of female coaches. And then you add on that to be Black, Indigenous, people of color, it decreases even more for BIPOC females in coaching. So when you look at the coaching fraternity right now, and being someone who's been a part of it for so long, how do you feel that we can create opportunities for female Black coaches, not only in youth sport, but just generally throughout Canada?
It's hard work. I mean, the reality is, you know, when you're looking at you have to look at the female experience. So when you're looking at the female experience first, there are so many things to consider. Family, you know, women tend to take on the role of family first, and children, and all those pieces of the puzzle that are just female related. And then once you add color, you know, and those pieces to the puzzle, now you're dealing with not only lack of representation, but also the challenges of being a female of color. So, you know, one, we got to recruit, we have to inspire. You know, we really have to educate. We have to provide, you know, I give an example for me is, you know, being at a volleyball camp with kids, and the coach pointing at the young white girl and saying, oh, she's going to be a great coach one day. And those are the words that come out when we're having the end of camp discussion. She's going to be a really good coach one day. And they give all the reasons why the young white girl, or, you know, is going to be a great coach. The young Black athlete gets, what a great athlete. Maybe she'll get a scholarship. Maybe she'll go on and play somewhere. But there's never the identification that she might one day be something more than just someone on a court. And I think shifting how we look at athletes and seeing them for more than just the person on the court in the moment, but seeing the possibilities. Can they think the game? Like as a player, was cut from my junior national team. I'd played a year, we'd made world championships, and then I was cut the next year for a different setter, for a white setter. And I look back now, and I'm the only one who's still coaching from that team. I'm the only one who's still in the game. And because I saw that there were opportunities for me to coach, because I saw beyond just being on the court. But it wasn't that I was inspired by my coaches. It wasn't that I was picked to say, oh, she's going to be a good coach. It was, I'm going to find a way to make opportunities for other athletes. So I was more determined to become a coach so I could create opportunities for other athletes. And so for me, I think the opportunities will be developed and created when we take the time to recruit and really let young Black athletes know, young Black females know, that there are opportunities beyond just being an athlete, that you can be an administrator. You know, I told Coach Lee that I remember going to university and thinking, I want to be a sports admin. I want to be a director. I want to be, you know, an athletic director. That's what I want to be. And yet when I had the conversation at my institution initially, it was like, maybe you want to go into education. Maybe you want to teach. Maybe you want to choose nursing. Maybe you want to walk this path. And I realized then that no one saw me in that role as leader. And I think that's a continued situation that's happened. That happened to me 30 plus years ago. And I see it happening now. They don't see us as leaders in a way that allows us to strive for more and for greater.
Julie, those are all just such important points. So I want to give the other two ladies a chance here. Coach Lee, just to weigh in on this about, creating more opportunities for Black female coaches within those positions across Canada. Your thoughts?
Yeah, just to build on Jolie's point, she's saying she had that conversation 30 years ago. And this summer, I know CBC Sports did a visual kind of audit of our youth sports space, and youth sports being the largest employer of professional coaches in the country, and there's 0 Black athletic directors, 0, right? And so, like that is a real barrier there. And there's a Dr. Ivan Joseph is a VP of academic affairs at Wilfrid Laurier University, which is actually my alma mater. But he was the only Black AD that I'd ever heard of, and he was at Ryerson for some time. And the doors that he was able to open for other Black coaches, I mean, you're still seeing the byproduct of that continue to grow. He's got a coach that he opened a door for, and it's funny, we were on a call the other day that U Sports hosted, but he said, I took away specific criteria, and, the coaches that I brought in were differently qualified. They weren't qualified based on what the letter of the law has been for so long. They were differently qualified. And, he opened a door to Roy Rana, who actually was an athletic director at my high school at Eastern Commerce, downtown Toronto. And Roy Rana took that, and it really launched his career into high performance. And now he's an NBA coach. And he, in turn, was able to open a door for Patrick Tatum, who now is a head coach at McMaster University for men's basketball. And so it really reaffirms just hearing Jolie's story. And that's the first time I've heard that specific story. And I knew that she wanted to be an AD. And it's something that we are hearing from coaches who've been in that space for 15, 20 years. Where is the advancement going to happen? And when we talk about systemic barriers and systemic racism, that's what makes it challenging. Is it's not something that we can pinpoint to a specific person, but rather the how we've done things, right? So it just so happens that a lot of older white men, when there are opportunities to hire, it is someone that it is likely to be someone that you look like. And so it's those it's those implicit biases that maybe can be explained as cronyism or nepotism, which are quite normal when you think about it. The issue becomes when we don't become intentional about opening up doors and having diversity. And diversity is the first step, and then inclusion is the next. And so I look at my position here at GFX. I think as of this spring, we'll be the only school with 3 head Black coaches. But then, I stop and I think for a moment, 15 or 20 years from now, are we going to have Black athletic directors? And should it take 15 or 20 years, given that Jolie had that conversation 30 years ago, given that Ryan Thorne had that conversation 15 years ago? And so those are the things that I'm trying to think about. It also makes me reflect back to my own beginnings in becoming more of what I would consider a sport leader. I had spent my first few years playing basketball in the States, and when I came back, right away I was like a point of contact for a lot of younger females. And this was back in 2012, and I saw that there were a lot of gaps for women in particular, for young women who wanted to pursue post-secondary opportunities, whose families were wondering, how do you go through this recruitment process? What are the next steps? And it inspired me to create CanLeads Sports, so Canadian athletes. And we do a lot in the Canadian women's basketball space, but really for those same reasons that Jolie referred to. So like just being intentional about creating opportunities for women, in relation to the multiple avenues for male sports and for male, media attention for sports. And so it's been an incredible journey thus far, but it just has you thinking, going back to your question, Leah, how do we get to that next step so that we're not waiting another 30 years to see some positive change happen?
Absolutely. And Tasia, I turn to you now because, opportunities, yes, but also how once Black female coaches, how do we keep them involved once they get there? Do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, getting them there, that is challenging. I think you have to have the right people in the leadership positions to actually get them there, that are willing to really push for change. But I think keeping them there is showing them the value, right? I think oftentimes females, and then Black females, are they're under the watchful eye of everyone a little bit closer than many others. And I even think about how I have a tendency to maybe change how I dress if I'm going somewhere. Maybe I change a little bit how I talk. Maybe I think I have had so many people that said, "Wow, Tage, you're not straightening your hair as much as you used to." And it was that element of trying to just fit in and get myself a little bit further. But for me, it's creating that space where you can really just be your authentic self, and no one's going to look at you with questioning your abilities based off how you look or how you speak or where you're from. And I am going to go back to the MWBA and that intentional piece. So when Brad James had reached out and asked if I wanted to get involved, he said, "I want all female at the volunteer executive level." And I was like, okay, I think I can do that. And then it turned into, if you're like good with this, and Brad was like, yeah, take it and run. And I said, okay, great. And I think we have, 5 or 6 Black women that are leading the charge in this organization. And again, that's that piece of being intentional, which then opens up the doors to have those conversations around, what do the athletes look like that are on the court? And is everyone welcome there? What do the coaches then look like? Is this a place where we can actually give all women an opportunity to coach in a space where the executive level looks like them? And we'll hear about, whether it's how someone may have spoken to them as a woman. I don't know how many times we've heard, go back to the kitchen, that's where you belong, go make me a sandwich. You hear those pieces all the time. If they have families, so how do we set up a place where if they're coaching or playing, that if they need childcare, how do we put that in place for them so they never have to say, I can't do this because I'm being a mom. You can be a mom and coach at the same time. So I think there's a lot of elements to how we support women as a whole. There's obviously just that extra added barrier of being a Black woman, but I think keeping them involved is making sure that they don't feel like we, I guess, don't feel like we're under the microscope of, I need to make sure I don't do one thing wrong, because one thing wrong turns into a meeting with the AD, and then a meeting, like, it's just all of these things. And you're like, if my male counterpart did that, what is that going to look like? Probably not too aggressive as it was towards me. So, it's all about creating that equal space for everyone.
Can I build on that, Leah?
Yeah.
So, when I spent most of my life in the greater Toronto area, and it's funny, like when I went to the States, I went to the University of Miami, and so really culturally diverse. I spent my last 3 years at Wilfrid Laurier University, probably the first time I'd been around so many white people. And I thought, that was an experience in and of itself. And I mean, I loved my time at Laurier, but it was just so different. You walk into a classroom and you just feel all these eyes on you. And as Tasia had said, you're cautious about how you're dressing, about how you're talking. You don't want to, again, if you're an athlete, you don't want to come off as someone that, is trying to, benefit off someone else doing work. Now, when I made the jump and moved to Nova Scotia, so just, I picked up and came out here, and I'll never forget, like within my first few weeks, the challenges that I had. I have worked with athletes, men, women, kids who are beginning, professional athletes, but the challenges specific to being a university coach in our post-secondary educational institutions are so challenging. I mean, I within my first few weeks, I had players that I coached that just told me, "Hey, I just look intimidating. I dyed my hair. Oh my gosh, coach, you look scarier than you usually do." So it's those kind of microaggressions that just kind of have you pause. And then, it's funny because we're in this space right now where I like to say it's dangerous to be a coach right now, because there's a big shift going on. We're dealing with a different generation. And so we need to be better coaches, certainly. But but it also has me talking a lot about the shifting power dynamics. I mean, I have parents that of players that I've coached that have never had a single conversation with me. And I mean, I can allude to the reasons why, but some of it does have to do with misogyny. Some of it does have to do with the fact that I'm a Black female. And I know that if it was a white male coach or even a white female, it wouldn't be that scenario. I've dealt with those issues even in this COVID setting. So at St. Effects, we're full on in person. It's almost business as usual. I think we've got the most course offerings. And one of my concerns coming into this year was the over policing of racialized bodies. And so one of the things that our school had done really early on to try to curtail some of the COVID related concerns was have an RCMP presence on campus. And so right away, we had parents, athletes, staff like myself that were like, whoa, why do the RCMP need to be on campus? You know, it's things like that. It is the conversations that happen about you that you don't hear about. It is the athletes that make up their mind that you are being tougher on them. It is the parents who refuse to talk to you and respect you as a Black female coach. And so it's just strange because I just, and it could just be my opinion, but at our universities, you're dealing with so many moving parts. You've got the alumni who are supporters, you've got the athletes that you're servicing, you've got the classes you need to teach, you've got recruiting that is always ongoing. And so I completely agree with Tasia. I think education needs to be a big part of what we are pushing. Education. And there's a million ways that we can educate ourselves. I think understanding difference is important as well. There are so many phenomenal anti-Black racism, sport historians, corporate coaches, sport coaches that can help educate. And I think the more we're trying to educate, but understanding we have to bring people in who are bringing that kind of expertise, I think that's the direction we need to go in. Just the sheer fact that I'm at a Canadian university, we know that every year we're bringing together young people, old people, staff that are from different walks of life. And so that was, like we use an equation here in our athletic department. It's E plus R equals O. So you have an event, and then the R is the response, and how you respond determines the outcome. And so what has been amazing to see is since the spring, summer to this point, I think our response has been like incredible. But what we're really interested in is what are those specific action points, the intentionality that Tasia and Jolie were referencing. That's what's gonna create some sustainability. So then I don't become just the first Black coach in the history of the Maritimes for varsity basketball. Like we want more. We want more representation. We know diversity is a key to success, and all kinds of diversity as it pertains to Indigenous groups, LGBTQ+, women, other underrepresented groups. I think it just requires extreme intentionality.
And we want more of this conversation. I have to take a quick break to recognize our title sponsor again one more time, Bison Transport. Let's take a look.
So I was at the top of the track, and you can just see going into corner one, it dives down, and you can't see anything else. And you just know, okay, this is going to be intense. And went down. It felt like I got thrown around in a garbage can. That's the best way I could describe it. And just the pressures are really, really tough, and they just drag you down to the bottom of the sled. You can't see anything. We'll have the maple leaf there. Nice. With our number. Or is it number maple leaf? Something like that. Yeah. You never know what you're going to be great at until you actually try everything. And just because there's maybe not socially accepted to do something, it doesn't matter. You gotta still try that because, it could bring you to the Olympics, or it could bring you to wherever you need to go, and you're gonna be really happy.
Sport Manitoba Leadership Series brought to you by our title sponsor, Bison Transport. This is the Black Female Coaching Experience. I'm Leah Hextall. I'm here with Coach Lee, Coach Tasia, and Coach Jolie. And Coach Lee, you just brought up so many incredible points about intention, education, representation. And I'm just thinking right now, I'd like to pivot to some questions from the audience. And this is one that stuck out to me. And Jolie, I'll throw this at you first, and then ladies, you can also chime in. How do you approach conversations on diversity with your team?
I intentionally recruit Black athletes. There aren't a lot, there aren't a lot of Black volleyball players, but I intentionally, one, it's because I'm part of the military. So I approach with the idea of opportunity for these young women for the future. It's always at the back of my mind. So we talk a lot about just who we are in this space as women. And, whether you're Black or Chinese or Aboriginal, because we also have an Aboriginal program at our institution, it's just that we talk a lot about who we are in this space and what we look like. And when we go to other institutions and they're making fun of us because we are Black or brown or whatever, how do we handle that? How do we face that day to day? How do we stand tall and not respond in a negative manner to racism that's subtle or not so subtle? I'd say more of it's subtle than not so subtle. And we have that conversation right from the beginning. I have that conversation with parents when I'm recruiting, explaining to them what it's like to be a part of the military, but also to be Black in a predominantly white institution, in a predominantly white sport. I have that with the parents. I try to make them feel safe with their daughters coming to play for me in this environment. And then when the girls get there, we have that conversation. Maybe not a lot, because I think this generation is pretty self-aware. And I think that's something else that we have to acknowledge, is that with TikTok, with Instagram, with the social media platforms that they have available to them, they're pretty self-aware. And I think when I look at who I am today versus Coach Lee when I was her age, I could not have started the Black Coaches Association. And I'll be honest with you, because I don't think I had the same awareness, the same self-awareness at that age that she has. And so the diversity conversation is actually not as difficult and not as broad as it might have been a few years ago.
And Tasia, I just want to turn to you for a second here, because as a technical director and performance coach for Basketball Nova Scotia, being with a governing body, are there discussions within that governing body about how do we look, the diversity that we're doing, inclusion, all those type of topics that seem to be, and I hate to say this, but seem to be buzzwords. They feel more like buzzwords than anything right now in this moment. But are there conversations about that through a governing body?
When all of this kind of, was put in our faces, I guess, back in June, because, we're not going anywhere else other than looking at social media and really watching the news. I hosted a panel with a few of our Black and Indigenous coaches here in Nova Scotia called A Challenging Conversation. And that was really the first time that I had said, I need to talk about this, because I'm sitting in a position where if I look across the country at all of the basketball provincial sport organizations, I believe I am the only Black female, possibly maybe the only Black person, I think maybe even only female, sitting in this title. I think that may have changed. I think Katie Hamilton was in PEI. So, I recognize that the sitting in the seat that I'm in suddenly has a lot more weight on it than it originally did. I think I certainly had the mindset and back to talking about my childhood growing up, that I just existed. I didn't really recognize what was or wasn't when it came to the color of my skin and who my parents were. And all of a sudden, over the last couple of years, as I mentioned, I guess someone else mentioned in that wonderful intro video, that I've been starting to find my voice a little bit. And so I do feel like there are certainly more conversations that need to be had. We have a safe sport lead at Sport Nova Scotia who's had some different panel discussions. You know, Sport Nova Scotia starting the Black and Indigenous Coach Mentorship Program is a really great step for a 2-year program. But there's still a lot of work to do. I think one of the biggest concerns that I have, and I won't speak on behalf of our other 2 wonderful speakers, but my concern is, you know, once we go back to normal and we're not sitting in front of screens and watching the news, that everyone's going to say, well, job done, high five everyone, you know, we're just going to go back to doing what we're doing. And if change happens, it'll be, you know, when I'm not sitting in the seat. And so, again, it goes back to that intentional piece. And I think it goes back to everyone, myself included, continuing my own education and recognizing when we have to force change to happen and make sure that it's happening not 10 years down the road, or not saying something like, well, you know, we'll review the policy and get to it maybe 2 years later. It has to happen now, or else we're never going to see change for the youth that are coming up that are hoping to be in a coaching space. Canada Basketball has a diversity and inclusion, I believe, committee that they formed this year. And I think everyone has a representative from all of the provincial sport organizations, which is wonderful. So the conversations are certainly there, but again, you know, you can only talk so much. And then eventually the people that are waiting to see change, if they don't see change, I know I would fall back into that space of like, you were just talking, like you were just talking to get through this, and we're just in the exact same spot. So that makes me lose trust. And then I start thinking about, like, did it really matter? Like, was this really a priority, or were we just kind of showing face? But I have all the faith in the world, especially in the community that I know, being the basketball community, that recognizing our Black athletes, both male and female, have the opportunity to play at the Olympic level, have the opportunity to play in professionally overseas, and they can play in the NBA and the WNBA. So, you know, we see that happen so often that, you know, our Black population across the country is never going to go away when it comes to basketball. And if we don't make sure that we're intentional in serving them with a purpose and making sure that they're prioritized, then I think that we'll just be in the same space, and you'll start to see a shift in where our athletes want to play.
You know, all 3 of you have used that word intentional several times throughout this conversation. And so I have to sit here and I think about being a female broadcaster in sports broadcasting, and I've been told many times by certain people, well, you got the job because you're female. And sometimes I turn around and I think to them, well, maybe I should get it because I'm female, because you know what? We're 51% of the population and the majority of it is still male. So I almost get nervous about saying this because I am white and I haven't had any of the barriers because of my skin color in my life ever. But, you know, Coach Lee, when we talk about needing more representation, especially in that athletic director position, do we have to be intentional in making rules that you have to either interview, you know, a candidate of color, just at least to get them in the conversation? Do we have to have, there needs to be this many percentage within your staff of people of color? I hate that we're there, but is this something that when we talk about intent that maybe needs to be happened on a governing basis for U Sports to say, we have to fix this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the methodology. That's the only way that doors were open for female athletic directors at the U Sport level. But I also think it's got its precedent set in how we've approached collegiate sports and in some cases professional sports. If you look at the NFL, they do have a rule that requires a specific amount of minority candidates to be interviewed. And so, like back in the summertime, one of our first calls for the BCCA was to conduct this thing called the Racial Equity Project. So our organization partnered with Janelle Joseph and the Ideas Lab at the University of Toronto to really reach out to every member institution. So this would be the 56 Canadian universities that have athletic departments and the 150 odd some Canadian colleges there are, to collect race-based data and to really be intentional about validating experiences, about taking an evidence-informed approach. That was one of the recommendations in terms of putting policies into place, to your point, Leah, about hiring practices and policies. Because again, I don't think that it's because of malice that we don't have representation. I think people follow policies, and policies are what inform, these structures. And so if we're intentional about having racialized minorities on hiring committees, if we're intentional about how we market those opportunities. Sorry, there goes my light in my office.
Coach Lee warned us, her light goes off every 20 minutes and she's got to go and censor it up. So well done there, Coach.
But I do think, like, when we talk about intentionality, I think it comes down to policies. Everyone that wants to do their job well is going to do things the way they're supposed to be done. And then that's one really tangible way to ensure that there is at least an equitable process to opening doors for other people. And I think there's been a shift, because the last 10 or 15 years, we have seen policies related to, hey, there needs to be underrepresented groups, whether it's language diversity, whether it's women. And so to me, logically, the next step is to create opportunities that are specific to Black and Indigenous, as well as people of color.
Yeah, the NFL, that's the Rooney Rule, which you're speaking of, in which when they go to hire, they have to have at least one or more diverse candidates in their queue that they're interviewing. And I have to agree. I think it might be something that our youth sports needs to implement within their policies.
Leah.
Yeah.
I also want to add that I also, when we look at Black athletes going through the school system, it's important that they finish school. Like, some of them go in with the intention of just playing sport and not necessarily thinking about what their future is beyond. And I think that's a situation where we're as responsible as coaches, and we're 3 Black coaches, Black female coaches, but since we are not the dominant number, that the responsibility falls on the head coaches of other sports to make sure that your athletes are graduating, make sure that they are pursuing something beyond just being an athlete on your court day after day after day, because I think that is also an issue that we don't talk about. It might be like brushed under the rug, that athletes are being passed through the school system. They're not graduating with anything they can use beyond being able to play every weekend and play their minutes on the court, win us championships, and then you're done. So I think that's an issue that also needs to be addressed in order to ensure that opportunities are available for Black female coaches, young Black men, anybody we're looking at the end of the day.
Yeah, Jolie, that's such a good point to you. And it relates back to your story about how they would look at, the white girl playing volleyball and say she's going to be a great coach one day, and the Black athlete playing saying, oh, he or she is such a good athlete. Well, let's make sure they get through school too. They're not here just to do the service. That's definitely something. It's a key point. And ladies, we're running close to time here. So you have all spoke tonight so well, and I think everyone who is joining us this evening can see how you have all made impacts on, whether it be Black female coaches, Black athletes within your lives. But this is one of, when I saw this question, I think it's a great way to end, and because it's something that I would truly like to know, and it came from our audience, is that it's not just about Black female coaches having to drive. How can someone like myself have an impact on what is trying to be accomplished here, to have more Black female coaching representation and at the technical and developmental level within sport? So this is a jump ball, ladies. Who wants to go first? David, can I put you on the spot and ask you first?
Sure.
What we're really asking here is, what as white people can we do? We have to carry the load. So let's hear it.
Well, listen, like I said, my dad is, he's white. He's fantastic. And, for someone who, for him, his wife is Black, his mother-in-law is Black, his 2 kids are Black, and we still have conversations about this all the time. So I think it's really important to make mention of even people that are are living with Black people are still navigating those conversations and those spaces. I know Coach Lee will probably touch on this quite a bit, but that allyship is really important. I know I was in a session with Cheryl Jean-Paul, who's coaching with Canada Basketball, and she talked about having, I can't remember the right term that she used, but basically people that are going to advocate for you behind the scenes, that you don't even know who they are. They're just someone that's, if you submit your name into to coach somewhere, that there's someone in there that has gotten to know you. They've taken the time to, have a conversation like this with you, who, if everyone else is looking at maybe passing over your resume, there's someone that's in there saying, no, like, this person has coached here, here, here. They've been on these panels. They have all their coaching certifications, just like these ones, but just because their name is Tasia and a lot of people can't pronounce it, doesn't mean that we should just, pass over her. So I think it's having the people that maybe you don't really know, that you've just had really great conversations with, that are advocating for you without us needing to go over and say, can you please put in a good word for me? Like, I need some help. We need people that are willing to do that without being asked to do that, because it obviously can be a little bit uncomfortable. And, my dad does it for me all the time. Obviously I'm his daughter, but, I also know that I've been in situations where I'm like, I don't feel like I was treated really well, and I'm not sure how to navigate that space. And then all of a sudden he's having a conversation with someone and getting more information than I ever could. So I think, challenging the system and being willing to have a courageous conversation. We always say challenging conversation, but you have to be courageous and really say, if someone meets the criteria of what we're looking for or beyond, and just like you mentioned, Leah, like, you probably didn't just get the position because you're a female. You probably had all the credentials. And I think we always think that, we're just going to give it to someone to fill that space. A lot of Black women, a lot of Black people, a lot of visible minorities, a lot of women, we have the credentials to do it. It just seems like for some reason we have to have about, 10 more things on our resume to even get a look. But, making sure that we're recognizing the people that already have what they need and have taken all the steps that they need to move on to the next level. And then the right person in the room saying, we need to give this person a chance.
How about you, Coach Jolie?
Sorry, I don't have much to add to that. I totally agree with what Tasia said. And, I think I am where I am because of, I had two great white men when I first started coaching stand up for me and pull me in when I didn't know what I was doing. And I had a great white woman pull me in under her wing and help me fly. And, Christine's going to hate that I say her name, but Christine Drakage at U of T, I stood on her shoulders. She is the reason I am where I am today. And, and so the allyship, being with somebody who is willing to let you stand on their shoulders to get ahead, to get where you want to be, is incredible. And, I can't say any better than Tasia did. I just absolutely agree that we just need partnerships that will help propel us forward.
And Coach Lee, how about yourself?
I think what's needed is for everyone to start and continue to think in terms of what's equitable, and let's stop using the word equal, because life just doesn't work like that. I think if we really want to do good work, it requires us to think about, who are we missing? Who's disadvantaged by these decisions? I would like our allies to call out all forms of discrimination, but specifically racism. If that's what it looks like and that's what it feels like, believe that person. Believe that person. And I've been very fortunate to have, I've got an awesome AD here at St. FX. I've got an assistant coach that I don't know where I would be without. I've got a ton of colleagues and friends that I've been able to make over the last few years. But I think being believed is a big part of it, because you start to think, am I going crazy? Why am I consistently held to a different standard? Why am I, constantly dismissed? Why am I? And, when you're a Black female, you're dealing with these intersections, and some of it is well, because you're female, and and then some of it is, well, because you're young and you're trying to, and you're just, okay, well, maybe that's it. But I think it just requires, like, we want our allies to in many cases stand in front of us, and not just beside us, stand in front of us and go to bat for us, because if it feels wonky, probably something's going on there, and it's still really uncomfortable to name it. Like, it's real, like, you know what I mean? Like, if you call someone racist right now, look what happened to old boy at the provincial government. I forget what his name is, but you know what I'm talking about, Leah?
Well, I wish I did, but I can't think of it right now. I know what situation you're talking about, but yeah, the name escapes me. Yeah,
I forget his name, but he called the Quebec provincial leader racist because I'm sorry,
Jagmeet? Is that how you pronounce his name?
NDP leader, yeah.
And he was like, your behaviors in terms of how you're responding to this conversation. And it was this whole blowover. And so, like, even naming it is a challenge. It makes white people very uncomfortable. It makes Black people uncomfortable. And I think we're in this space now where I know for myself as a sport leader, I have to be ready to go to bat for my athletes. If there are things that are discriminatory in nature and they're not equitable, it is my job from a character standpoint, from an occupational standpoint, to do that. And I hope that as a colleague, that my peers feel the same way about me, and that my superiors feel the same way about me. And I mentioned I'm in this weird space where, you get funding from donors, and, you're also servicing athletes, and Canadian universities, it's a very privileged space. But I think being believed is probably the most important thing. Being believed, and having your white allies stand in front of you and say, no, that's wrong, and this is why.
I love that. I love everything that was said here tonight. I feel like I've had this great education by listening to all three of you ladies tonight, and I think that's part of it, is we all have to start to listen a little bit better and actually hear what's being said to us. And it still is uncomfortable. I get uncomfortable. I was nervous tonight even about asking certain questions, but you ladies got me through it. So I thank you so much for sharing your experiences here today for the Black Female Coaches Experience, Bison Transport, our title sponsor in the Sport Leadership Series. And if you can believe it or not, this is the fourth live series. And the fifth one is going to be on March 17th. It's our final one. It will be female leaders in sport and business. We have an incredible panel coming to you. They're going to have a lot to live up to after tonight. So I'm throwing down the challenge right there, because this was fantastic. I do want to let all of our participants know who are registered guests. There's a Zoom networking event after. So go grab a glass of wine, cup of coffee. Well, maybe not coffee. It might be a little late for that. Go grab yourself a nightcap, take a little bit of a break, come back and join us. The Zoom link is in your confirmation email, or you can go to sportmanitoba.ca/leadership. There's a capital HER in that. So once again, Coach Lee, Coach Jolie, and Coach Tasia, thank you ladies so much for being here with us tonight. This has been a great experience. You gave us so much to think about. You taught us a lot, and honestly, it's just been a privilege to speak with all of you and get a chance to talk to you a bit. So thank you so much. Once again, to all of our guests out there, please join us on the Zoom networking session. As always, we want to thank that title sponsor, Bison Transport. We cannot do this without them. They're so important, and we hope that we'll see you all back here on March 17th for our final fifth session for the Sport Manitoba Sport Leadership Series. Stay well, everyone. Stay healthy, stay safe, and have a wonderful night. Take care.